So I'm going to do something a bit more interesting to this page using InlineStyles. Let's say we're trying to get people to sign up for our newsletter. The page itself is pretty normal. I do have a section of it that's been defined as a div with an ID of join, which is trying to get people to sign up for the monthly newsletter. Well, what I'm going to do is a little bit of JavaScript to make this stand out a bit more. I'm going to jump over into my JavaScript file. Let's get rid of the easy code. Down at the bottom, I have a window.onload that's going to call a set timeout function that passes in begin animate, 5000. That simply means do a single call to the begin animate function in 5 seconds after the page is loaded. What does that do? Well, up here in begin animate, what I'm doing is I've got 3 lines that all grab that actual div, which currently is part of the body of the page. What I'm going to do is a couple of CSS style tricks. I'm going to set its position to absolute, then its left position to 0 pixels, and its top position to 100 pixels from the top. Well, then what? I'm now going to call setInterval, and this is the repeating timer event that's going to call the animateBox function about 20 times a second. And if you remember, setInterval gives you back a variable, gives you back a handle to that interval, which I'm just going to store in interval handle, which is defined as a global variable up here. So really all the work is happening in this function called animateBox. First thing it does is say whatever the current position is, I'm going to add 5 to it. In fact, the first time this ever gets called, current position will be 0. So we add 5 to it. I then grab that div and set its style.left property to whatever the current position is, and then I'm going to use the plus sign and add px, remembering that we have to pass in any units that are used by that CSS style, in this case pixels. Now current pos is actually a number, but px is a string, so it will concatenate these together as a string, so it will be 5px, 10px, 200px, and so on. And all that I'm doing here is saying if the current position, the leftmost position, gets to be greater than 900, and bear in mind what I'm checking here is just the number variable without the px, that's fine. I'm going to clear the interval, and it makes it so that this function doesn't get called anymore. And then I'm going to reset the div to its original styles. Really, I'm just going to pull off any custom styles that I applied up here in the begin animate section. Not an awful lot of code, and let's see what impact it has. I'll jump back over and I'll just open up this page. Well, after a few seconds, what's going to happen is our little thing that we're trying to push is going to pop over and make itself rather annoying. And yes, indeed, we're using our powers of JavaScript for evil here. If you note that after it crosses the screen, it's actually jumped right back down to the bottom here, just as it normally was. And I don't recommend doing this on a regular site. You're just going to annoy people. But I think it's a pretty good example of, in just a few lines of code, that you can really significantly manipulate some of the content that you have on your page. And using the ability for JavaScript to talk to CSS, even in just a few simple properties, can be very powerful indeed.